Hello, philosophers, mystics, and saints. I am back. If you haven't listened to my last podcast, lecture, whatever you want to call it, from last time, you might, because I'm just continuing the letter from December 20th, 1917, from Spielrein to Jung in this one. But I will go on to a couple of letters to Freud that she has after this. But she does have an addendum, and last time I just, the video was already quite long. So if you haven't listened to it, it's fine. I'll just give you a short recap. So this is one of the later letters from Spielrein to Jung. They kept up correspondence even after they sort of had a falling out, and Spielrein now regards herself as a Freudian. She's worked very closely with Freud and moved to Vienna for a while, and in her letters she is often, at least in her later letters, she's very professional, academic. They're just kind of exchanging their ideas and thoughts. They send each other dreams, etc. It seems like it's a pretty fruitful relationship at this point, a true friendship, intellectual friendship. And she does want, though, Freud and Jung to reconcile. I think that's one of her sort of goals, because she likes both of them. So, she respects both of them, etc. So, in this letter she was talking about she has like a diagram of the psyche. She was talking about symbolic language and where it comes from and how it emerges. And this is her addendum. The symbols are reversible, i.e., one can as well say, for instance, that the subconscious symbolizes the conscious as vice versa. Take, for example, the idea of a difficult problem in the conscious mind. Its parallel image in the subconscious is that of sinking into a dark sea. The accepted explanation is that we view the subconscious image as a symbol. But if we direct our attention to the subliminal realm, i.e., if we view it as reality, then all our conscious thought merely constitutes a barely successful attempt at portraying this reality in some symbolic form. Let us consider the same image of sinking into a dark sea from the viewpoint of the subconscious and the unconscious, repressed part of which she says the unconscious is the repressed part of the subconscious, from the vantage point of the subconscious wishes. This subconscious image is a symbol for the repressed desire to return to the womb, i.e., the unconscious employs that particular subconscious image and transforms it into a wish fantasy. From the viewpoint of the non-repressed subconscious, one would have to state the reverse. The dark sea is a symbol of the idea of a difficult problem once it enters the subconscious, and at the same time a symbol for many other related ideas in the subconscious. The fantasy of returning to the womb is likewise only a symbol, which also portrays, let us say, a difficult situation or the libido surging back into infantile channels. From the standpoint of the organ emotions, one might say that the image of the dark sea, as well as difficulties with a conscious task, are merely an expression, an image, of some impediment to the breathing, for example. The notions that occur to one then would be symbolic offshoots of the original symbol. Where does the right interpretation lie? Everything depends entirely on what conclusion we wish to derive from an analysis of the subliminal symbol, because the formation and selection of a symbol are clearly influenced by the most varied forces within us. That is enough for now. And so she has a continuance of this. It's very short from the next day, the 21st of December. And this is what she says: a symbol is the product of compromise, constellated by processes taking place in the subconscious and the unconscious, which for their part receive elements consisting of remnants of conscious life and subconscious organic sensations. While the conscious and the unconscious probably have much in common in regard to thinking and also feeling down to a certain depth, and therefore constitute an uninterrupted range of consciousness, the subconscious is much more alien. But more about this next time in connection with the question of emotion. So it's just so good. I love it. And it's so cool how people write letters to each other and how they are basically writing what could be in a theoretical book. They're writing these ideas to each other. And, for all of the sort of problematic aspects of Jung and Spielrein, when, they sort of, because of the origin of their, how they met, and, the age gap and the power, imbalance, the asymmetry of it, it ended up, it seems like, at least from reading this particular letter, it seems like they ended up figuring out their friendship. And I just think that the level of sort of intellectual inquiry is really positive. Okay, so I did want to switch gears and read a letter. Well, first I wanted to read her letter of introduction to Freud. And she's 24 at this point. This is a letter from May 30th, 1909. And Freud does not readily accept her in the beginning, because he's just a bit suspicious. But this is how she introduces herself. Dear Professor Freud, I would be most grateful to you if you would grant me a brief audience. It has to do with something of greatest importance to me, which you would probably be interested to hear about. If it were possible, I should like to ask that you inform me of a convenient time somewhat in advance, since I am an intern at the hospital here and therefore would have to arrange for someone to substitute for me during my absence. Perhaps you expect me to be a brazen seeker after fame who plans to bring you some wretched earth-shaking scholarly paper or something of the sort. No, that is not what leads me to you. You too have made me feel awkward. With expressions of my esteem, looking forward to your kind reply, S. Spielrein. So it's just so cute and so, she doesn't, if she had ChatGPT, she could run this by AI, right? First, and ask, how do I become, not self-deprecating and just kind of insecure, and I can be more professional, etc. But she's 24 and she doesn't have AI, so we have to forgive her. Something I didn't think about is reading the actual letter of Freud in response to her, so I will go ahead and do that. So that letter was sent on May 30th. This Freud responds in June 4th. He says, "Dear colleague, you have put me in a predicament. I cannot possibly ask you to travel to Vienna on a matter that, as you put it in your letter, concerns me very personally. Indeed, I cannot even guess what this matter may be, and how you were led into offering to make this sacrifice. For the present, I would therefore ask you to let me know in writing what it is all about, so that I may form my own opinion of the expediency of your journey and possibly reflect a little on the matter beforehand." And she does write him back, and he responds, This letter is, what is it? Oh, it's just a few days later. It's still in June. He says, "Dear colleague, your remarks make it clear that I had completely misunderstood your letter. All the same time, I am glad that I asked you for a preliminary intimation of what was bringing you to Vienna. For now, I can tell you unhesitatingly what my attitude would be to the subject that so concerns you. Dr. Jung is my friend and colleague. I think I know him in other respects as well, and have reason to believe that he is incapable of frivolous or ignoble behavior. And this will, change, of course, after their own breakup. I am reluctant to set myself up as judge in matters that affect him intimately. I do not feel competent to do so, and if I were compelled, I should not be able to ignore the old legal dictum, audiatur et altera pars. Nor do I think that you would wish me to act less judiciously. From the enclosures you sent with your letter, I rather gather that you used to be close friends, and it is not difficult to infer from the present situation that this is no longer so. Did that friendship perhaps arise from some medical consultation? And did his readiness to help a person in mental distress perhaps kindle your sympathy? I am tempted to think so. Remember, Freud thinks that transference happens in every successful therapy dynamic, and that talk therapy is the love cure. So he's speaking, sort of, he knows. He expects. That's why he says, I am tempted to think so, for I know of many similar instances. But I know nothing of how and through whose fault it came to grief, and do not want to pass judgment on that. Still, if on the basis of the above assumptions I might be permitted to address a word to you, then I would urge you to ask yourself whether the feelings that have outlived this close relationship are not best suppressed and eradicated from your own psyche, and without external intervention and the involvement of third persons. Should these remarks be inappropriate, then I would beg you not to take them amiss. Yours faithfully, Freud. P.S. I am returning the indiscreet enclosure, and can only say that I do not hold the somewhat gushing effusion against the young man, although as his senior I have to smile at such appraisals. So I don't know what this means. I don't know what the indiscreet enclosure is. But anyway, I just feel as if Freud, I can hear his voice. I can hear the tone of his voice, and the style of his thinking. He is such a father figure here. I think he's being pretty professional and responsible in terms of not wanting to get involved and not wanting to be triangulated. This girl that's writing him might be one of many. He is experienced with dealing with transference. He doesn't want to pass judgment on Jung, who is his colleague and friend right now. But eventually, Spielrein and Freud come to an understanding, and they do meet, and they do start corresponding. I think I will actually read one more letter of Freud, because maybe after they have sort of broken up, Jung and Freud. He says, for instance, which is interesting. Where is it? Well, he says in 1912, June 1912, to her, I look forward as October approaches to receiving your decision about coming to Vienna in order to break your dependence on Jung. I am most grateful for your clever words to Jung There is no lack of others who are at pains to widen these chinks into a breach. Because, remember, she really wants just everyone to be friends, basically. Or at least I think that's what she's always wanted. He says to her in 1913, January 20th, when Freud is writing to Spielrein, he says, "My personal relationship with your Germanic hero has definitely been shattered. His behavior was too bad. Since I received that first letter from you, my opinion of him has greatly altered. Scientific cooperation, however, will presumably be maintained." And this is the letter, I think, that I want to read. Yeah. Okay, so this is from May 8th, 1913. "I am sorry to hear that you are consumed for longing with J. And this at a time when I am on such bad terms with him, having almost reached the conclusion that he is unworthy of all the interested concern I have bestowed on him. I feel that he is about to destroy the work that we have built up so laboriously and achieve nothing better himself. Quite apart from our scientific differences, his personal behavior merits severe criticism. But no doubt it is fruitless to complain about him to you. Let me therefore rather stress the one thing that is quite clear to me and more welcome. I gather that you are composing your thoughts, which is bound to benefit the child." Talking about like her child that she has had. "That is the right course. I hope that this commitment of your libido will prove happier for you than the earlier one." I love that. If we would all incorporate that phrase, I'm committing my libido to X, Y, and Z. That would be hilarious. "You will also find it easier now to be content with being restricted to just one man." I think talking about her husband. "I imagine that you love Dr. J so deeply still because you have not brought to light the hatred he merits. When I had to take sides at the beginning of our correspondence, it looked as if it would work out. I am glad that I am now as little responsible for his personal achievements as I am for his scientific ones. Please let me know when the child is due so that I can send you my heartiest congratulations." Okay, so she's pregnant right now. At that point, that is, and he says, okay, just one more. On August 28th, 1913, Freud says, "I can hardly bear to listen when you continue to enthuse about your old love and past dreams." And he says, "I shall not present my compliments to Jung in Munich, as you know perfectly well." So, it's interesting how, people are gossiping, I guess, and talking about, their personal grievances. So going back to Spielrein, I wanted to read this letter from June 11th. I think it is 1909. So she is still 24. So all of this, her breakup with Jung is really fresh. And I think she may talk about it at some point. She keeps talking about it. There's a lot of letters. A lot of her letters to Freud are about Jung. So this is from June 11th, 1909. "I knew I would be unable to sleep. Oh, even in the past, people had sleep problems. Now, wanderer, the moment comes, you must stay cool and clear. Well, I cannot help complaining of a faithless lover. Hardly anyone in the world believes in faithfulness. Instead of the love of one young man, they say, one can win the love of another or transform the feeling some other way. 4.5 years ago, Dr. Jung was my doctor. Then he became my friend, and finally my poet, i.e., my beloved. Eventually he came to me, and things went as they usually do with quote unquote poetry. And she does put that word in quotes. He preached polygamy. His wife was supposed to have no objection, etc., etc. Now my mother receives an anonymous letter that minces no words, saying that she should rescue her daughter, since otherwise she would be ruined by Dr. Jung. The letter could not have been written by one of my friends, since I kept absolutely mum and always lived far away from all the other students. There is reason to suspect his wife, and there's a question mark there. To make a long story short, my mother writes him a moving letter saying he had saved her daughter and should not undo her now, and begging him not to exceed the bounds of friendship. Thereupon his reply, quote, I moved from being her doctor to being her friend when I ceased to push my own feelings into the background. I could drop my role as doctor the more easily because I did not feel professionally obligated, for I never charged a fee. This letter clearly establishes the limits imposed upon a doctor. You do understand, of course, that a man and a girl cannot possibly continue indefinitely to have friendly dealings with one another without the likelihood that something more may enter the relationship. I'm very disappointed in Jung. Men and women can absolutely be friends. Come on. But, he has his own particular situation with Spielrein, so interesting. So what he's saying here is that, when it's clearly defined when the relationship is clearly defined by me being the therapist and her being the client, I'm paid, we meet in the hospital, he could probably add all of these different details, it's fine. But then, she's no longer my patient. Like, I can't help it, basically, I guess. That's what he's saying. So he actually says, therefore, this is to Spielrein's mother, therefore I would suggest that if you wish me to adhere strictly to my role as doctor, you should pay me a fee as suitable recompense for my trouble. In that way, you may be absolutely certain that I will respect my duty as a doctor under all circumstances. And later he says, my fee is 10 francs per consultation. So, I think this is interesting. It's very different from, of course, what, sort of the ethical guidelines that we follow today, the boundaries that we follow today in therapy and any other kind of service, that Jung would say it's about payment or not. That's what I need to have boundaries. I don't know. What do you think of that? I don't know exactly what to say about that. I think it's quite curious. And I guess there's another letter, because it says, now comes letter number 2. And again, this is what Spielrein is reporting to Freud. So we get to know about it, I guess. So I think this is from Jung again. Quote, I have always told your daughter that a sexual relationship was out of the question and that my actions were intended to express my feelings of friendship. He later says, this isn't what happened. And so his, I guess, feelings of friendship, he says, turned out to be a grave mistake, which he greatly regrets. So basically, he's kind of painting this picture that, Spielrein took this all wrong. Like, she misinterpreted what sort of happened. She tells Freud that Jung gave her his diary to read. And Jung asserted to her that no one could understand him as I, Spielrein, could, that only a short time ago we could sit in speechless ecstasy for hours, that he wept in my presence. And now Spielrein says, and I think she mentions somewhere else that he tells her when he gives her the diary that only only his wife and her have read it, kind of creating this understanding that like she is the second most important woman in his life. And she says, and now I arrive in a mood of deep depression, since I have just learned of a tragedy that occurred with a woman patient whom he first led on, then rebuffed. Then people talked about other such feats, and thus it was only natural that I should think he had been toying with me until he received the letter from my mother and took fright. She kind of goes on and says that, and she says, I admitted my thoughts to him, which were basically that there wasn't anyone that was saying anything good about him except her. Like she was going to, it's like she should, I think in her eyes, she should at least receive some kind of gratitude, because regardless of all the rumors of Jung and all of these women patients that he's allegedly leading on, she speaks good things. She says, I only know that he gave me a long sermon about all he had done for me and was still doing. And well, what it all added up to is that he is just my doctor again. Yes, he said he thought he had committed a folly. It had not done me good. I want too much now because he was too good for me. And she says, his profoundly sensitive soul was more important to me than anything else. From then on, I always refused the consequences, which she puts in quotes. My love for him transcended our affinity until he could stand it no longer and wanted poetry. For many reasons, I could not and did not want to resist. But when he asked me how I pictured what would happen next because of, quote unquote, the consequences, I said that first love has no desires, that I had nothing in mind and did not want to go beyond a kiss, which I could also do without if need be. And now he claims, again, this is Spielrein to Freud, he was too kind to me, that I want sexual involvement with him because of that, something he, of course, never wanted. You can form a picture. My ideal personage was completely destroyed. I was done for. I thought I wanted to kiss him and had no will to resist, since I no longer respected either him or myself. And then she talks about this situation, which I'm sure is a scene in the movie that I haven't seen, that she stands there with a knife in her hand and she doesn't know what she intends to do with it. So there's clearly an argument here. Jung is trying to, I think, in the way I see it, kind of abandon all responsibility and put sort of the blame on Spielrein and resent her for causing trouble in his life with his reputation and his wife and everything. And so she says that he grabs her hand and she resists and she doesn't know what happened then. But he suddenly cries out, "You've struck me." And she runs out to get on the trolley and she realizes there's blood on him. And she says for 2 days she rages and weeps. And in between, she writes a letter to Dr. Jung. And she tells Freud, he hasn't received this, but I described my state to him. She says, I also realized that we must separate and could not bear the thought that this had to happen after such a horrible scene. At that time, Professor Freud first appeared to me as an angel of deliverance. I wrote a poem to you. So I think, I wonder about Spielrein reaching out to Freud. I wonder if Sabina Spielrein at this point, in her 20s, she's had this I don't know, I guess 4 years, she says, kind of back and forth with Jung. There's an affinity, there's an alignment between them. They like to talk about the same things. Um, I remember in one of the letters, or maybe one of the diary entries that Sabina Spielrein writes, she talks about how Jung tells her that he loves talking to her because they just love talking about the same things. And his wife, referring to Emma, I think I might have mentioned this in my former video, his wife is only interested in what her husband is interested in. So it doesn't matter even that Emma wants to talk to Carl Jung about, maybe dreams and archetypes and the anima and animus, etc. And she writes on this subject too. But Carl Jung, at least too, when he's talking to Spielrein, he says that, it doesn't matter. Like, he can't take it seriously because that's just what wives do. They're interested in what their husbands do. And I don't know, I feel a lot of feelings for Emma at this point because, historically, psychoanalysis is really in its beginnings. It's still in its beginnings, I would think, we could say. And also, alongside of this, concurrently, women are have recently, like in the past, at this point, maybe 40 years, something like that, have been able to matriculate into, I think that's the right word, into the university, not as special dispensation from like a king or a pope or, some nobility, but just because women are now allowed to get degrees. But that hasn't happened, that hasn't been happening for a long time. Spielrein could probably be said to be one of the first to get a medical degree and to practice. It hadn't been possible for too many years or too many decades before her. And so, and Emma is basically Spielrein's age. They're just 3 years apart. And I think that Emma Jung got married and she had 5 kids. And in that time, I think it's probably impossible or not super possible to be a mother and be a wife and have 5 kids and say, hey, I actually do want to go to the university. And who cares if she's inspired by her husband? Like, that's great. I mean, isn't that the basis of what people do, friends do for each other, lovers do for each other? They inspire each other, right? It's not an accusation that, someone shouldn't be like jealous that, oh, you're liking the same things I'm liking and you're reading the same books. You just want to imitate me. But we're inspired by each other, right? And so, but I don't think Emma Jung, I haven't actually looked this up. I don't know. Maybe she did go to the university and get a degree, but I'm just saying that it sounds like, according to Spielrein, if she's a reliable narrator, Carl Jung is not being, I think, the most fair to his wife in terms of her own intellectual interests and academic potential. So anyway, you kind of see through going through some of these letters from Spielrein to Freud what is happening. She says at some point, and this is all like in the same month, I shall send you the entire original of the famous 3rd letter because I cannot stand to look it over again. Now my mother comes to call on Dr. Jung because he has invited her. And skipping a bit, she writes an anxious letter to Dr. Jung and in reply receives letter number 4, in which I have underlined a classic passage with blue pencil. So again, I kind of love, but then I'm also horrified at the fact that I guess in the times of letter writing, people would just send each other various letters, and I'm just wondering, like, where are the boundaries of confidentiality, right? It's kind of akin to today, like sending someone a screenshot of like a text that you received. I don't know, people are just always the same. We just never change, do we? She says on June 13th, I am really lucky that my parents have reacted so reasonably to these events. I described the manner of our parting to my mother, and she passed it along to my father, who only said, and I love this, I really like her parents, actually. Her father says, people have made a god out of him, and he is nothing but an ordinary human being. I am so glad that she boxed his ears. I would have done it myself. Just let her do what she thinks is necessary. She could take care of herself. Thank you, Dad. like that's, I just love how like her father is like, you know what? Like, she's fine. Like, she can figure it out. And then she says, this is June 13th, just think, Professor Freud, he did give me his entire soul. When he handed me his diary, he said hoarsely, okay, here it is. Only my wife has read this, and you. And Dr. Jung is no hermit. He sees many other women besides me. I stress this point to make it clear I am not one of those women who merely want to have a little affair, with or without consequences. For a long time, our souls were profoundly akin. For instance, we never discuss Wagner, and then one day I come to him and say what distinguishes Wagner from previous composers is that his music is profoundly psychological. That the moment a certain emotive note occurs, like she's talking about it, and then she says, Dr. Jung's eyes filled with tears. I will show you I am just writing the very same thing. Now he tells me how Freud sometimes moved him to tears when they thought along the same lines this way. He found your face enormously likable. And she says that was 1.5 or 2 years ago when there was still no question of a closer erotic relationship between us. She says, if only he had come to me, had said that our friendship meant more to him than any stupid gossip, that we should separate until coarse sexual feelings no longer occupied the foreground for him, but that later he would come to see me, that if I wished, he would even come now, that he would have the courage to acknowledge me as his dearest friend, not just in hidden corners and with various subterfuges. What would I do then? I would say, he is a person whom I revere like a divinity, from whom I wish to separate in deepest love. Do you suppose I want to warm myself in the glow of Dr. Jung's fame by having him declare me his friend? So, she says, a comment about that. I think Spielrein has it right, honestly. But in defense of Jung, I can understand how utterly panicked he was, right? Like, if he could have been calm and thought, oh, this will blow over, this will be fine. Maybe we went too far in our emotional affair, but you know what? We have something special. Let's just let this blow over. We can just be friends and continue on. To be like, she's wanting something noble from him, but he's unable to do that because I think he's feeling like the situation is catastrophic. So, she doesn't have as much to lose, right? For him, for Jung, everything's at stake. He has his marriage, he's older, he has his career. So he's kind of acting a little bit unconsciously, or a lot unconsciously and horribly at this point. And this young 20-something, knows kind of how it could have gone. Like she's basically saying that she would have like understood whatever he needed and put aside sort of her own romantic feelings for him because she respected him, right? And there is that. There's a lot, there are many different layers. There's not just the romantic layer here. But I think Jung was able to do that later. But he just couldn't have distance at the time, is what I think. Spielrein says, I stress these things again and again so that you may see it was not just the usual doctor-patient relationship that brought us so close together. He was writing the paper while I was still in the mental hospital. At that period, I told him once I had dreamt about his wife, who complained to me about him. Oh, that's interesting. Saying he was so terribly dictatorial and that life with him was difficult. Even that he did not respond to this like a doctor, but sighed and said he had realized earlier that living together was difficult. I spoke of the equality or intellectual independence of woman, whereupon he realized, oh, and this is what I was mentioning before. He replied that I was an exception, but his wife was an ordinary woman and accordingly only interested in what interested her husband. She says, my head heavy as lead. Two most powerful components are battling within me. On the one hand, my hurt pride demands I demonstrate to you what I meant to this man. I have many letters from him which are clear enough. So it's almost like she needs Freud to validate. She thinks that Freud, because he knows Jung, can validate what she knows was true between herself and Jung, but Jung cannot admit right now because he's afraid of being shamed. So it's really interesting and probably very uncomfortable for Freud to be in this position, I have to say. I mean, Jung and Freud already had a kind of enmeshed relationship that burnt out pretty quickly. And she quotes another passage. A lot of this letter to Freud is quoted passages from Jung's letters to her and things that he said. She says, but I really must quote a passage since you say you want to hear too. Therefore, if one is already married, it is better to engage in this lie only once and do penance for it immediately than to repeat the experiment again and again, lying again and again, disappointing someone. I think that is plain enough, Spielrein says, or how about this passage? Quote, when love for a woman awakens within me, the first thing I feel is regret. Pity for the poor woman who dreams of eternal faithfulness and other impossibilities, and is slated for a rude awakening. She says, my state after learning of the entire correspondence can well be imagined. I told my mother that it definitely went too far, and especially that I cannot tolerate such disrespect for my mother. She says, not long afterward, I learned through acquaintances that Dr. Jung was telling people that he had treated a patient for a long time without pay, but now he had been forced to write her mother that she should pay him for his services because this patient was making certain demands on him. An acquaintance of his then asked whether there wasn't a student in the colony claiming to be involved in some sort of affair with Dr. Jung. That was nonsense, Jung said, since she was only his patient. He supposed a doctor really should be cautious about treating patients gratis. He said people talked about his having 8 mistresses. Well, he was really a perfectly harmless person. And she says to Freud, I am prepared to show you everything I possess in the way of documentation. The person to whom Dr. Jung made his admission, someone else tells me, smiled, of course, saying that Dr. Jung wanted to paint himself as lily white for his wife's benefit. And then there's something about Freud's own daughter, which I don't know what daughter that is. She says, and this is again, like all the same year, the same months. A week ago, I went to see Dr. Jung. He receives me with great coolness. It comes out finally that his ambition, I guess, was hurt because I had taken ages to answer his letter, since I did not want to give him my new address, so as to not be disturbed in my work by emotional upheavals. I told him how my exams had gone, but was deeply depressed that he displayed no pleasure at hearing I was capable of doing good work after all, and was now an official candidate for the medical degree. I was ashamed of having believed in any prophecies, and told myself, not only does he not love me, I am not even a good acquaintance whose welfare matters to him. He wanted to show me we were complete strangers to each other, and it is humiliating if I go to see him now. But I decided to go the following Friday, but to act completely professional. The devil whispered other things to me, but I no longer believed them. I sat there waiting in deep depression. Now he arrives, beaming with pleasure, and tells me with strong emotions about I think he was being analyzed by someone, about the great insight he has just received about polygamy. He no longer wants to suppress his feelings for me. He admitted that I was his first dearest woman friend, etc., etc. His wife, of course, accepted, and that he wanted to tell me everything about himself. So, obviously, this is kind of chaotic and a big mess. So that's all I think that I'll read. I finished the book, I think, like maybe yesterday or the day before. I mean, I'm sure that Freud does and does not want to hear about this, right? Because it is kind of airing the dirty laundry. And I think that maybe Spielrein, being age 24, she just needs someone to believe her. She doesn't think that the relationship had to end in the sort of dramatic way that it did. And that proves to be true. She proves to be right, because they regain correspondence once everything cools. And they each have sort of their own lives, and she grows up a bit. And he, I think, just maybe reflects on the situation. But it's really, she has a lot of courage to reach out to Sigmund Freud to try to have him. She needs someone to be her advocate. It seems like she has pretty great parents as well that kind of trust her and everything. So what do you think? Let me know. If you don't know, I love reading Correspondence, and I'm still kind of going through. I put it down and I haven't picked it back up yet, but I do have another video about the correspondence between Heidegger and Hannah Arendt. I do have the selected letters of Friedrich Nietzsche. I don't know, I think I have some correspondence of Kant. So this is just a kind of an interest in mine to read, old vintage letters and correspondence, and correspondence is letters, but diaries, and I don't know, it's just also my guilty pleasure. It's my way of being interested in history, like personal history, and collective as well. So, yeah, what do you think about this? Have you seen the movie? I don't know why I'm putting it off. I think because I'm reading John Kerr's A Most Dangerous Method, and I want to read what actually happened first and not conflate like Hollywood's sort of representation of it in my mind. So I probably will watch the movie, but just at a much later point. But let me know if the letters, are different or how they compare to the movie if you've seen it. I can't remember what the movie is called. It might be the title of John Kerr's book, A Most Dangerous Method. I don't know.